Good morning, Breakfast with Bacon fans. I have for you today a show that is very near and dear to my heart. Today, I have Miranda Rodriguez and Joey Pontarelli. So it's a nice Spanish and a nice Italian name right there with bacon, right? And they are the founders and I'd say co-hosts on Restored Ministry. You guys correct me if I misspeak on anything, but Restored Ministry is a ministry for children or now adults dealing with the effects of their parents' divorce. Did I blow any of that, you guys? And welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having us. No, that's right. And one maybe quick change is we focus primarily on teenagers and young adults who come from divorced families, but also broken families. So we're situations where things are really dysfunctional at home, or the parents aren't legally divorced, but they might be separated as well. So all those situations, we're serving young people like that, and we want to help them to heal and build virtue so they can feel whole again and break that cycle of dysfunction and divorce in their own lives.
Yeah, well, so I just want to start right at the hit it between the eyes. For those of you watching, you know that I'm very passionate about saving marriages. And I've been the prodigal. I left my own husband, and for 4 years we were separated before we reconciled. And we are about to celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary by the grace of God this August. Cannot even comprehend that. But then I witnessed divorce in my own family when my daughter left her husband, and I watched the devastation that wreaked on my grandchildren, which has been forced with her children, like any other children of divorce, to be silenced, to be internalized. And this show is very tender for me because of that, because I never, ever want to make it seem like I am attacking, most specifically, my daughter, whom I love and adore and would take a bullet for. But because I understand the pain of divorce, because I understand the pain of a bad marriage. And Miranda, I know your mom personally, so I'm a little bit sensitive to the fact that I adore her, and you too are the child of divorce, yes?
Yes, I am. Yeah. It is very difficult, like you're saying. It's just, and it's kind of, I don't know, like it's just a taboo topic for kids. We're not really given the space to talk about our pain very much. I think we feel bad. We feel guilty because we don't want to hurt our parents. We know they're already hurting. And I know that's one of the reasons Joey founded Restored, was because there really wasn't a space for children of divorce to voice their pain and suffering and trauma that is so real. And I really believe it has a huge impact, not just on us, but on our culture in general. And I think we're seeing that with the increasing divorce rates and lack of commitment that a lot of, I think, young adults feel. They're kind of scared of making that leap to marriage. And I don't blame them, because I think that a lot of us are walking around with this unspoken hurt and trauma that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. And so before I really get into Restored Ministry, I want to say, and maybe if you are a parent who's divorced and you're watching this, I let me ask you this question, because I don't want to hurt you. Miranda doesn't want to hurt you. Joey doesn't want to hurt you. We don't want to hurt our parents. We don't want to hurt our children. We don't want to hurt the people around us who are divorced, because Miranda, you just said it. They are hurting too. But, and I'm asking you, divorced parents, this question. When you are supposed to be the one that heals all of your children's wounds, when you are the one that would take a bullet for your child, I don't think there's any parent watching this, so if they saw a bus coming, wouldn't push you out of the way and take that bus. And yet, when it comes to divorce, we get thrown under the bus, right? I mean, that's not what you intended. All three of us understand that you did not intend for your children to be hurt, but we are. So here's my question to you. When you become the inflictor of the wound, how are we to talk to you about it? Because this whole point of this show is Joey and Miranda will speak for other children of divorce. and to be able to say that I want to share with you my pain, and I don't want you to minimize it. I don't want you to tell me to get over it. I don't want you to tell me there's nothing you can do about it. I don't want you to not hug me. I don't want you to not kiss my wound. I want to cry with you, and I want you to receive my tears, and I want you to take that bullet for me. I think that's about as succinct as it can get. So as a parent, as the divorcee, what can we do? And this is an honest question. I'd love to see comments posted here. What can we do to not, okay, it's going to hurt you either way, but we're attempting not to hurt you. So the both of the feelings of you, the parents, as well as your children, can be expressed, because as I said, I know Miranda's mom. I don't want to hurt her. I don't want to hurt my daughter. I don't want to hurt my mom. I don't want to hurt Joey's family. I don't want to hurt anybody, but it's inevitable. And we just kind of have to get tougher skin. So I think this is explaining just how tough this is, you guys. That's why I'm taking so long to kind of circumvent this. So my question is going to be to your parents, and, you know, not just your parents, but you know what I'm saying, right? What should we say? So now I'll go back to you guys. What do you think we should say? Because I've been saying, children of divorce, rise up. Start telling your parents it doesn't have to be this way. You can go back to daddy. You can go back to mommy. And I'm willing to walk with you as you do that. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I can jump in. That's beautiful. And I think that, like Miranda said, there's so many reasons that children of divorce don't speak up about this topic. She listed a bunch of them. Like, we don't want to hurt our parents. Maybe things at home have been so dramatic already that we don't want to add more drama to it. Another reason might be that in our culture, we've normalized divorce. It's so common that we just think of it as a part of life. It's not something that we give extra attention to. And even though the research is super, super clear, this is a very serious trauma. And because of the trauma of going through your parents' divorce or a ton of family dysfunction, we often struggle in a number of ways, whether that's with emotional problems like anxiety, depression, loneliness, anger issues, the list goes on. Bad habits. I know for me, we'll get into our stories, but pornography was something that I used as a way to cope with the pain and the problems that came from my parents' divorce. And that led to other issues too. And then, of course, relationship struggles. So the research shows that by far, this is the area of our lives that's most impacted by our parents' divorce. That is our own relationships and our future marriages. And so the consequences are very real. But you're right, it's a sensitive topic. And so one of the things we do on our podcast when people come on to share their stories, we ask them, do you hate your parents? And it's kind of an odd question, but the reason we ask that question is because I've never had anyone on the show say that they hate their parents. Everyone always says, no, I love my parents. And in fact, what we've realized is so often we go out of our way to protect our parents because we feel so protective of them. We don't want to, expose them to shame or divulge details that we shouldn't. So we've seen kind of that protective instinct in people like us. But in order to heal and, overcome the effects of trauma and the trauma itself, we have to talk about this stuff. And so anyway, that's our challenge. And what I would say in this interview to anyone listening, especially parents, if you've been divorced or you're separated right now, is, we're not here to judge you or condemn you. We're not here to put you down in any way. We want the same thing that you want. We want to help your children to heal, to grow, and to thrive in life, to have really beautiful lives, beautiful families, beautiful relationships. But in order to do that, we got to talk about these uncomfortable, difficult truths. You can't help someone, heal their pain unless you first understand that pain. And so that's where we're coming. That's how we're approaching this topic. So does that help?
That helps so much. Yeah. Miranda, you have anything to add to that?
My only thought was, I think, part of the problem is when you're going through something like a divorce, it's going to be really hard for you to have the emotional capacity to be open and receptive to your children's suffering and pain, because you're already experiencing so much hurt that, man, to add to that burden is a lot to ask. So I think one of the most beneficial, helpful things could be to find a very good source of emotional support very early on. So whether that be a really good counselor, or a really good friend, someone that you can confide in and that can kind of be something you lean on. Because what happens a lot of times, and we talk a lot about this in our book and in our podcast, is parents turn to their kids for that type of support, which is really unhelpful.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's
then they're not,
unhealthy, actually. Very
it's very
unhealthy.
unhealthy. Yes, exactly. And so, and it definitely fractures the relationship between parents and their children, and it certainly makes it really hard for children to open up about their own pain and suffering to their parents. So I think the more that parents have an outside source of emotional support during this really difficult time, the more that they're going to be able to be open and available emotionally to their own children.
That is good. That's absolutely the truth. Let's just try to understand both people's pain, because I think I get a little bit too defensive of the kids you just phrased it perfectly well. You are so wounded at the time of your own divorce that it's hard to heal your children's wounds, but do the best you can, and maybe later look at them and not be afraid to address them. That's very wise, actually. How did you two, I didn't even mention to my viewers the name of your podcast and how they can find it, which I'll do it at the end of this show again. So what is the name of it? What made you two come together and say, we need to do a podcast about this?
Yeah, so the name of it is Restored Helping Children of Divorce. If you search in Spotify or whatever podcast app you use, you'll find it. We've had people tell us that it's the only podcast out there that touches on this topic of being a child of divorce, going through your parents' divorce. And so on it, we bring on people to share their stories, just like we're doing now, just to show people like, hey, this is a very real trauma, has very real consequences, but you're not meant to stay there. You can heal, you can grow, you can overcome this and move on with your life. And that's a really important point we wanted to make too. We're not promoting any sort of victim mentality. We don't want people to stay stuck forever. I think that's maybe a misconception of our ministry and maybe the podcast too. So we also bring in experts. You've come on the show, Dr. Bacon, to talk about particular topics that are near and dear, pain points in their lives, whether that's, relationships, navigating emotions, things like that. And so again, it's called Restored Helping Children of Divorce. And in terms of its inception, so years ago, I was on a flight from Philadelphia to Chicago. I was visiting my then girlfriend, now wife. And I don't know what happened that weekend, but for some reason, everything just really clicked for me, where I was like, there were some struggles in the relationship, I think. And I realized like, man, why do relationships feel so much harder for me than it does for my friends, for other people? And so as I was pondering it, I'd always known that my parents' divorce, separation, it had affected me deeply and led to a lot of pain and problems. But this really made me want to do something about it even more than I had done in the past, because I was already on a path of healing, but I was like, I want to do more for myself and I want to help other people. And so just had this idea, like, what if there was an organization that built resources that help young people who come from divorced or broken families to heal and to build virtue so they can feel whole again and go on and break that cycle in their own lives. And I want to focus on that last part, break the cycle. So often as we see, this cycle of dysfunction and divorce is repeated for generations. And we want to stop that. Someone has to stand up at some point and say, no, I'm not going to repeat the same, infidelity. I'm not going to repeat the same disrespect, dysfunction at home. I want to build a beautiful family. It's not going to be perfect, but I want to build something really good and beautiful so that my children could have that example ingrained in them, so that then when they go on to build their own relationships and marriages, it's not going to be as difficult for them. So we want to help people break that cycle, but that starts again by healing your trauma and building virtue.
You met Miranda and said, hey, let's do this. How did she become involved?
Yeah, Miranda, do you want to tell that story?
I hope I get it right. I think what happened was I wrote a piece called Dear Divorce, and I shared it on social media, and I think I emailed it. Do you know who Dr. Carrie Grass is?
I have heard of her.
Okay, so she runs a really cool company called Theology of Home. So I emailed her about it. And just because I knew, she's really passionate about families and things like that. And then she connected me with Layla Miller.
I love Layla.
Yes, she's really passionate about this topic, this issue. So and then I believe Layla sent my information along to Joey. And then Joey asked me to come on the podcast, and we did a great episode. It was awesome talk. And a little bit after that, he asked me to help out. So
It was organic.
yes, it was and it was probably 2019, I think, right before the pandemic. So yeah.
I knew we needed her on the team. I was just doing it slowly. So I didn't tell her at the first, but as soon as I read that article, I was like, this girl needs to be on our team. So we started with the podcast, like she said, and then I kind of went from there. And so yeah, Miranda's our director of content at the moment, just overseeing kind of what sort of content we put out and understand the needs of our audience.
Well, I'm going to attach not only your Restored Ministries website to this broadcast, but I'm also going to attach that letter because that made me cry when I read Dear Divorce. It just ate me up. And again, it touches me here because it is so real. And I think about my own grandchildren right now who are silent, who even when I give them a freedom to speak, it's very little bit you can tell that their pain comes out, but only in bite-sized pieces because they're afraid. They've trained themselves not to talk about it. They've been told not to speak to me, not by my daughter, by the way. And so you watch them navigate and you wish you could just scoop up, because this is another generational thing. You've got grandparents here, who we grieve watching our powerlessness and wanting to help. But, knowing one of the things I like to tell to, grandparents or other people is that one of the things kids do, and correct me if this is not true for you guys, because obviously you're a little bit more public about it than others, but you go through the stage where it's easier to just not think about it. I want to lock it up because if I don't think about it, then I'm not going to be unhappy. But whenever that box gets open, I have to face that pain. So you try not to, or kids will say to me, it's fine. My parents would have never gotten along. It's fine. And mom's better with the stepfather. Dad's better with so-and-so. So I just find that kids wanted at one point to talk about it and they still feel the pain, but if they address that pain, it's too much. So they just put it in a place and tell themselves they're okay. Is that true for any of the people you've worked with or for yourselves?
Yeah, I think we come across that a lot. I think there's a lot of suppression going on in a lot of us because we don't have the capacity to deal with it on our own, and we don't know who to turn to. And it's just, like you said, easier, quote unquote, at least short term. So I certainly use this tactic, and I believe Joey did some as well, although I think he was more self-aware from the beginning. Joey, you can correct me.
No, there were definitely parts of my life where I didn't maybe fully connect the dots, but I'm a little bit atypical in the sense that it damaged me, if I'm honest, so much when my parents separated. It just totally shattered my world and brought a ton of pain and problems into my life, to the point where, again, I started dealing with emotional problems like anxiety, depression, loneliness, a lot of anger for me as a boy. I dealt with bad habits like pornography, other, unhealthy behavior, and then relationship struggles over the years, like just struggling to trust, to be vulnerable, being terrified of love and marriage, not really believing it could last, not wanting to get married. And so I kind of always had that sense that, okay, this really impacted me. But it was over the years of kind of, unlayering this sort of trauma that I'd been through, where I fully understood how much it was affecting me, not just in the past, but today. And I think that's the biggest thing that people need to hear. It's like that trauma that's in your past, sometimes people think it stays in your past, but sometimes the past lives in the present. And that's really the kind of hallmark of trauma, that you, inside of you, there's this like little kid that went through that thing. And if triggered, you can act as if you did when you were a 5 or 10-year-old kid. For me, I was 11 when my parents separated. And so we have literally adults walking around with like these little children inside. And I think that's why we see so much of the brokenness in our world, is that there's so many people who've been to trauma that haven't healed it. And as a result, we see all the brokenness, like I said, in our world today. So I definitely over the years became more and more aware. And that's one of the things we see a lot, like Miranda was saying, is that people can, go through this as children, or even as teens, and then they kind of deny or even do well in life. Like things might be fine for a while, and then it comes to a point where they, try to enter in a relationship, try to get married. We had one woman on the podcast, I don't remember which episode, but she shared how, she thought that her parents' divorce didn't affect her at all. And then it wasn't until she was like 26, I think, she's a nurse, and she was on a mission trip in Central America. And for some reason, it all just came crashing down on her. She just became completely debilitated. And it even took her a little while after that to just uncover, with the help of a counselor, that this thing that I had been through, my parents' divorce, all the family dysfunction that led up to it, is greatly impacting me right now. And then thankfully she began healing. So it isn't until often like the symptoms become profound and debilitating that we actually reach out and get help. But the trauma can be there. It just might not come out in the ways that, you know, we see in some other people's lives.
Is there usually something that causes people to recognize it, like that lady did at 26? Have you guys found, or, you know, is it just, if someone talks about it, is it just accidental? Is it just I stubbed my toe and all of a sudden I remembered it? Or is it just so different for each person? What are your thoughts on what makes
Yeah,
them realize has affected them?
I'd love to hear Miranda's thoughts. The thing we've seen most is relationships. When people enter into relationships, especially, you know, once they're at a point in their life where they're maybe considering marriage, and they know like, okay, I'm dating seriously now. I'm not just dating for fun and like I did in high school or something. It's like, now I want to consider this possibility of marrying this person. We're often filled with a lot of insecurities, a lot of fears, a lot of like, I don't know how to do this. I didn't see a marriage built well in my family. So how do I go about this myself? And so that's often where it starts. But there can be other starting points too. It kind of varies person by person. Emotional problems are another popular kind of symptom that makes people realize I need some help. And then once they, again, uncover beneath those symptoms is this trauma of, you know, their parents' divorce, coming from a broken family. But I'd love to hear what Miranda thinks too.
I was going to say the same thing. I think a lot of it comes down to dating relationships and navigating them. As a child of divorce, you kind of realize that something's not working. And I think oftentimes that can trigger you to think more deeply about relationships in general, but what you witnessed in your parents' relationship and their divorce, and how it might actually have affected you. So I'm sure it's like Joey said, varies a lot, but I think oftentimes it is that entering the dating world, taking it seriously, that you realize there's some issues.
And the fragility of relationships. They're so fragile. Even with your best friends, you know, parents, children, it's just like, we have to be very careful how we say, what we do. You know, when my daughter and I were estranged at one point, when we were reconciling, she had sent me a text like, we're just so toxic. See, we aren't meant to have a relationship. And I had said to her, no, this is conflict. She was conflict avoidant. She's gotten much better. But having to explain, no, this is what conflict looks like. And it's okay if we disagree. That's not toxic. And so to kind of work through that, I mean, we have the healthiest relationship we could have ever had now, but we had to work through it like that. So I'm really grateful. But let me cut over to ask each of you, tell me your story. How old were you when your parents divorced? A couple of questions Layla asked in her book, right? How did it affect you then? And how does it affect you today? And anything you want to throw in there. And I don't care who goes first.
I can start. So I believe my parents' divorce was when I was 11, and we were living abroad. And my dad and my brother, shortly after they told us, they moved back to the States. So then my mom, my sister, and I stayed in South America. And you know, it was very painful in the moment. I, you know, remember the day they told us. It was very, very sad. And I think it's kind of typical teenage, you know, preteen behavior, where I would wear black and I was kind of rebelling a little bit more. And I think there was an episode on the podcast about this. I don't know how frequently this is, but I actually started having disordered eating as well during that. And I think that that's not uncommon with children of divorce. And that
Let me just cut in, because people who may not understand eating disorders, it's a matter of control. Like most of it, people who cut, if I can control my eating, I can control my life. And because this divorce makes you feel so out of control. So that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And then, my parents started having these other relationships, and that was very difficult. And that was probably the most turbulent period between, especially me and my mom, since we lived, in the same place. It was very, very painful, lots of conflict.
Between
Because
you and your mom, or between your mom and the man she was dating?
between me and my
Okay.
mom, because of her
New
relationship.
relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was very difficult. But we moved back to the States, and I think over, a couple years, like, you kind of learn to deal with it, but not deal with it. So I just ignored a lot of the pain and suffering that we talked about, suppressed it, and didn't think about it too much again until I was about 21, and I started my first, more serious relationship, and it ended a few months after we started dating. And I just remember feeling so much anxiety and pain because I felt like something was wrong with me, because there was just so many issues with the relationship, and I had felt so ill-equipped to kind of navigate that. And so I thought, maybe I'm just not called to be married. Maybe I can't, be someone who gets married and has a family. And that thought filled me with so much despair. So I decided to see a counselor, and by the grace of God, I was put in touch with someone who was really phenomenal and so helpful. And she kind of first introduced the thought of, is it possible that your parents' divorce has affected you and is still affecting you? And I really pushed back a lot for a long time, for a while, but very, very, very slowly came to consider that maybe it did affect me. Maybe it had hurt me, and left wounds there that needed to be dealt with. And with her help, we started kind of dealing with that. And I'm very grateful now, 7 years later, that I am really happily married. And
To that one that you were questioning?
no, no.
You ditched him and got a good one, right?
They were all good.
Okay.
But no, I'm
You
very
found Mr.
grateful.
Right.
Yeah, Mr. Right. And he's wonderful, and we're so glad to be together, and that I was able to work through some things. And still today, I think it's ongoing. I think we all have to kind of face those wounds sometimes, even years and years later. But anyways, that is kind of how that came about.
And you made a human together now, didn't you?
Yes, we have our daughter, and we're gonna have a son in August.
Oh, you're pregnant.
Yes. Yeah, you can't.
I can't
see,
tell. I hate people like you that don't look pregnant. I looked pregnant in my eyebrows when I was pregnant. So God bless you. Well, good. I'll be calling your mom and saying congratulations, how awesome that is. The idea of having children, then, was that part of the healing, or was that part of the fear of, like, are we going to do this to the kids? How do we make sure that we don't get divorced? I mean, I'm going to just go really deep, really quick, because of what I do for a living. What if one of you has an affair? Because I always say affairs don't happen just to unhappy marriages. Sometimes if your boundaries are too low and you're like, whoa, what happened? So there's no accepting of it. There's no promoting it. But I've seen it happen, and couples are blindsided. Just kind of curious, knowing the pain of divorce. If you're not wishing it on you, we covered this conversation in the blood of the lamb, not going to happen, right? Mm-hmm. But one of you wants to get up, having an affair. What do? You're going to fight for the marriage? You're going to realize, come hell or high water, I don't want to do to my children what I did? Or is it like going, whoa, now I don't even know your parents' story. I'm not saying that's what happened, either of you. But, oh, now I understand my parents. Maybe it's okay to get out. What are your thoughts on something like that?
Well, I mean, I'm very hyper vigilant, about that sort of thing. I think as the children of divorce, that's something that we are probably think about more than the average couple. If that were to happen, I would like to think that I would fight for our marriage. I know Steven has said that he would stay, that he would be faithful, no matter what. I hope I have that fortitude if something like that happens, but I cannot imagine how difficult that would be. And so that, yeah, it's something we pray against, and we just try to be really proactive in having a healthy, good relationship, good marriage. But yeah, I would hope that if something like that were to happen, that God would give me the strength to be faithful and to fight for our marriage. And I have all the respect in the world for the people who do. I've seen it firsthand, and
that they work through it. Yeah.
It's
so
phenomenal.
That is the first for both of you. That's the first layer of protection, is to pray, talk about it, pray against it, cover your marriage, put the spiritual armor on it. The second thing, and this is actually secular research, and then I found it in my own research too, the absolute other most important thing to do and say is that divorce is never an option. It's like never an option. That vow of till death do us part has to be so ingrained in you that when you find out you've married Hitler, you don't leave. I mean, let me rephrase it. You don't divorce, right? Time for another radio show. But I've done things saying divorce or abuse doesn't unmarry you. Get the heck out of the house and get safe, and you may never be able to move back in with that person, but it doesn't unmarry you. So this idea that, no, this is for life, and we're going to try to heal one another. So the second most important thing I'm trying to say, if I sum it up, is this is for life, come no matter what. And I'm not divorcing. And that seems to stop you when the pain comes, because even the healthiest marriages have pain where you're like, hey, I don't have any, I'm not going to look at the menu because that's not an option. You know what I mean? So you're 50% there, saying we're going to pray this thing and we're going to be aware of it and protect ourselves. So good for you. What about you, Joey?
Yeah, no, I love the real talk. I love getting into topics like these because it is
I'm like way real. Sorry.
No, I love it. It is a pain point for so many people that we serve, that, mom or dad had an affair, or both of them had an affair. And it just leads to a lot of pain and problems in their own lives, right? In the young people's lives, like feeling like, am I doomed to repeat that in my own relationships in the future? And there's some research I've seen out there that says that, if you come from a family where mom and dad cheated on their spouse, you are more likely to do that yourself. And so that's terrifying, especially if you want a good, beautiful marriage. And so, yeah, like Miranda said, I would just echo everything that she said, that, praying for our marriage is very important. Praying together, not just praying for the marriage. And then also, yeah, just being very practical about it. One of my mentors says that we tend to over spiritualize marriage. Like, it sounds kind of blasphemous though, because it's a sacrament, it is spiritual. But in reality, a lot of the reasons that marriages fail is the practical stuff. Like you mentioned, the conflict, or, not loving each other to the point where one of you goes off and has an affair, things like that. And so I think if we could, be proactive and just be aware that that also is a possibility. Like when there's one talk that we offer on marriage, like it's 7 tips to build, healthy relationships and a thriving divorce-proof marriage. And one of them is at the end, we talk about at some point in your marriage, you're probably going to want to quit. You're probably going to want to walk away. And I think understanding that that's a real possibility, that you would want to walk away, understanding that you might find someone else more attractive. You might find someone else, more empathetic, someone who makes you feel better about yourself than your spouse does at a certain season in your marriage. Like, just being real about that and understanding that that is a possibility, I think is really, really helpful. But yeah, for me, like, that has never entered my vocabulary of like divorce, of separation, anything like that. And so I'm grateful to have found a beautiful wife, and we don't have a perfect marriage, but it's something we're always working on, and we do have a good and beautiful marriage. And so it's it's totally a possibility, something we try to be proactive with, and we have open conversations about it too. I mean, obviously, one of the things I learned early on is that physical infidelity usually is preceded by emotional infidelity. And so if there's something in a relationship with maybe a friend we have, or whatever scenario, my wife or I can say something like, hey, how are things going here? Like, that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. So having that open line of communication, I think is really important too. But I love the fact that you're acknowledging that this is a possibility and something we have to keep an eye on.
Yeah. I mean, and I say, straight up, because people be like, well, after I tell them my story, they're like, well, I know my spouse wouldn't. He's not that type of a person. And I look at them, I'm like, so I am, because I
Yeah.
admitted that I had an affair. I'm a whore. Right. And they're like, well, no, no, no. I'm like, I am a good Catholic girl. Love God, never turned my back on God. And I was 22 years old, 21, and a man preyed on me, and I have full control of my decisions, take responsibility. But the point being is, do you think you have to marry that kind of a person? Any one of us is capable of being that person. And that's why I always talk about it. And because people are like taken aback when I say that. And so, yeah, so Joey, you didn't finish telling us your story then. So you were how old when you said you were 11 as well when your parents separated?
Yeah. So very similar to Miranda. So I was 11 around the times when my parents separated and later divorced. And like I said, it brought a lot of pain and problems into my life. I mentioned emotional problems, relationship struggles, bad habits like pornography got into my life. I grew up in a Catholic family, but we weren't very devout. And so I very much so pushed God away at that point. I wanted nothing to do with him. And so it was really by meeting new friends who were just these really joyful people. And I was miserable, being hooked on porn and just living a really bad life. I knew that I wanted to be happy, and that stuff wasn't making me happy. And so I wanted to be like these friends. And what I realized was they were Catholic Christians. And so I started to be like them. I was like, whatever you have, I want it. So I started to pray. I started to learn my faith. I started to build virtue, and that made life so much better. But before long, I realized that I still felt broken. And again, I traced it back to the breakdown of my family, and I knew I needed to heal. So I looked around for some help, a resource retreat speaker organization that was specifically helping a young person like me in a practical way. I didn't want to read a academic journal on this trauma. I wanted something that was super practical. Tell me how to heal. And so I would ask really smart people, like, how do you heal? What can you do to heal? And I was never satisfied with the kind of vague answers that I got. And so over the years, just trying to seek out healing myself, I've done over 6 years of counseling, 10 plus years of spiritual direction. And, I've been for the past 20 years navigating the pain and the problems from my parents' divorce and just learning kind of how to do that. I've relied a ton on my mentors to really help me through my relationship struggles or, navigating my difficult emotions, things like that. And, been able to make a lot of headway. And at a point, I realized I just want to help other young people who are going through this, because I felt so alone. And I'm sure Miranda would say the same. It's like we felt so alone, like there was no one there for us when we needed someone to be there for us. And so we want to be that for those younger versions of us. And so thankfully today I'm married as well to my wife Bridget, like I mentioned, and we have a baby girl Lucy who we're obsessed with, and we want to have more kids as well in the future. And so it's really beautiful to be able to kind of be in a spot where you're really, really broken and know you need help, and then pursue that help and then get to a better spot. Not that you don't need to keep working on yourself. What I say is like every new chapter in life brings a new challenge. And so your brokenness might resurface and you need to, delve into your healing further. But it's beautiful to see. And we've seen that a lot with the young people we've worked with, or just people who've shared their stories on our podcast, who say like, these are the struggles I dealt with. These are the specific things, whether it was going to counseling or using this model of therapy, or spending time with this spiritual director, this counselor, or just being in a good relationships with people where I could be open about my experiences. Those are some of the tactics that we preach. Those things like really help them to the point where now their life is much more beautiful. They have a better relationship with their mom and dad. They have a deeper relationship with God. They're able to have healthy conflict with their spouse, even if that still remains kind of tricky territory to navigate. They're able to try to be the parents that they wish they would have had, and on the list goes on. So it is possible. And that's the thing we're trying to help people accomplish.
I wanted to ask you next, both of you. I know, Miranda, you have siblings. Do you have siblings, Joey? And then what is the value of siblings in healing from divorce? Do you think it makes it easier? You think it makes it harder? What are the things that we have to navigate? Because it would seem to me you have a team. You have people that you can they know your pain. But I know in my own case, my older sister and I seemed at the time immune. We're like, yeah, whatever, we don't care. My younger two siblings both had to see a counselor, so depending on the age. And we didn't really talk about our parents' divorce at all until the past like 10 years or so. So speak to siblings in dealing with your parents' divorce.
Yeah, I could jump in quickly. So I'm one of six. I'm
Oh.
number two in the family. And so, yeah, obviously a lot of siblings. And I absolutely love it. Wouldn't trade them for the world. I will say, yeah, it's interesting to see how each one of us is affected differently. We've looked at the research in different areas. Age is one variable, like you mentioned, Dr. Bacon, that can play a role. It doesn't always, though. We've seen people who, were very young when their parents divorced that didn't really seem very affected by it. And then people on the flip side who are a little bit older, you'd kind of expect them to be able to better navigate it, who are much more affected. So it's kind of a toss-up. That's what the research says. That's just one variable that doesn't determine your level of impact. But yeah, I think siblings can be very, very helpful, or the opposite. We've seen both. Like we've seen cases where there is that bonding factor where it's like, okay, we're in this together. We can talk about it amongst ourselves because we're all going through the same thing. We can't really hide it from each other like we can with our friends or the outside world. And that's what I experienced with my siblings. Like we would have some very real conversations about that. On the flip side, what we have seen sometimes is that there can be some competition between siblings in a sense. I don't know if that competition is the right word, but basically competing almost for your parents' attention, especially because it might be so limited. Because I know when parents are going through a divorce, like Miranda mentioned before, you're just so emotionally tapped. And even like your time is so filled, money's thin usually. There's just so much. I remember my mom, trying to fill both roles at home, like be mom and dad. She just couldn't do it, to the point where, my siblings and I got into trouble because she wasn't able to be everywhere at once. And I don't blame her for that. It's just kind of the reality of the situation. And so, we've seen that in some cases, but overall, I think the sibling bond can be helpful, especially if you do actually have those real conversations.
Yeah. Miranda?
Yeah, I do think it can be helpful. I would say one of the challenges with divorce is that you deal with it for really the rest of your life, in the sense that, especially if there's blended families, so if mom or dad remarried, you're just dealing with kind of some of the tough situations that arise with blended families for the rest of your life, right? So like, who do you spend Thanksgiving with? Who do you spend Christmas with? Stepsisters doing just like all that kind of complications that come up.
It's not the Brady Bunch.
Correct.
Right.
And that doesn't really end at any point. So what I found with my siblings is that it's nice we're in this together, because while at the time of the divorce, we were all kind of young, so we weren't really talking about it, and we weren't even all under the same roof. So there was kind of this, a lot of space between us. Now, as adults, we can kind of bond over, this is challenging. It's hard that we have to pick whether to spend Christmas with mom or dad. It's not fun that we have to deal with this other issue. And so it just gives you a sense of camaraderie and a sense of like, you're not alone in that challenge. Especially when it comes to just like the logistics of dealing with divorce.
You touched on another subject earlier. Your brother went with your dad and your sisters went with your mom. So for you, as is true with many children of divorce, there's like a double hit there. So you lost a sibling for a while as well. Is that what were your thoughts on that? Do you make any suggestions? I know all families are different, but do you suggest all the kids stay together? Do you speak to that?
I would. I do think it's better for the siblings to be together. It's not something I've reflected too much on, but I do think it would have been really nice to have that support. And I think, especially because he was older than I was, and then we were very, very distant until he was 26. So, he was probably 14 when my parents divorced, 14 or 15. And so it was a good 10 years until we started getting close again. So I do think that it would be helpful for the siblings to stick together.
Yeah, and I'm going to stick my input in there just for parents watching, or it is a hard enough for the children. And I realize that, well, why should the parents have to be without their kids? But I don't know how to say this without it sounding harsh, but it's not the kids' fault. So you parents, one of you is going to have to be without your kids at some point. Don't make the kids have any extra loss. Let in your case, what, 3 of you, let the 3 stay together. Let the 6 stay together. Unless the child specifically says, I want to go live with the other parent. This is a time where kids feel so powerless. Let them have as much power as they can so they can feel, well, so empowered, that would be my thought on that. Do you have anything to add to that, Joey?
Yeah. Divorce is so unique in that all these situations and problems are presented which don't have a good answer. Like what's that movie, Catch Me If You Can, I think, where Leonardo DiCaprio plays the Frank Abagnale, I think, if I remember right, where he was a con artist essentially. And in the movie, it's really interesting. I think it's towards the beginning, his parents divorced, and they asked him, there's this like iconic scene where they asked him like, okay, do you want to live with mom or do you want to live with dad? And he just like, I think it was in a courtroom, he just ran out of the courtroom, just like ran down the street and basically never looked back, and then went on to leave this life of like doing some horrible things. And so in that scene though, it's like he's faced with this question of like, hey, I have to choose between mom and dad. No child should ever have to choose between mom and dad. And so, yeah, there's not great answers, but I would agree with your assessment that it's better if siblings stay together for sure. In counseling, there's some new tactics coming out where they recommend that maybe, if there's a lot of conflict at home, instead of separating, parents would maybe get an apartment and one parent would go there for some time to let things cool off, come back home. That's one tactic I've heard of. Another one, which I can't say I'd recommend, but it's just out there, is that the kids would live in one apartment or one home, and then mom and dad would switch off.
I've already started seeing that.
Okay. That's something that I could see being kind
awesome.
of the lesser of two evils sort of thing. So yeah, it's these very unfortunate situations, not great solutions, but something that might be better than just splitting the kids up.
No, but you know what's so good about that solution? I think is it makes very real to the parents. You don't want to do this. Well, I've got to do this. I got my clothing here. I've got a job. And yet we make our kids do that. My grandson, when he was still little, he says, what was the word he used? He goes, it wasn't ridiculous. Annoying. He goes, it's annoying going back and forth. He was about 8 years old when he said that. And so there was a judge in Wisconsin who had ordered the parents to do that. The kids stay put. You guys figured out you come back and forth into the house. And I think they do see, at least if they're honest with themselves, it's tough on us. I can only imagine what this would be like for the kids. So I do think more judges need to start, not out of vindictiveness, of course, but just out of please, let's open our eyes and realize the layers of difficulty involved in divorce and try our best, because then too, mom and dads have time to heal. They may not want to, but they do have time. And I've seen many reconciliations already. Praise God. It's been amazing. My second question, by the way, I talk too much, so interrupt me if I don't let you finish your thought. It's not a second question. My 98th question to you is, both of you are married. What are your spouse's family situations? Are they children of divorce as well? Or are your spouses in nuclear families? And is there a difference between them? If so, between them and you, if so.
I can go first. So Stephen comes from an intact family. I'm very, very grateful. I see a very big difference in how he handles issues, and me, I think I still am very, very scared of conflict. Just have a lot of issues still surrounding that, and I just see how for him it like doesn't bat an eye. Like it's just kind of, things that happen. So I think it's really beautiful, and it's been very healing to have him come from an intact family and see how he was raised and how his view on marriage and just the stability that he brings to my anxious disposition. So it's really been wonderful, and I'm very grateful to his parents, because I know that marriage isn't easy, and you know, they stuck it out and they're still together after, I don't know, probably 30 years. So
That's
it's wonderful.
Cool. Yeah, and for me, my wife, Bridget, she also comes from an intact family, and that was something that, yeah, it's left a mark on me for sure. Kind of seeing how things happen in their family, how they operate, and probably one of the reasons I'm most grateful for that, aside from her having that formation and not going through the sort of trauma that me and my siblings went through, is just that my daughter Lucy and our future children will be able to look to that side of the family and see what I believe family is meant to be. And so one of the fears and one of the struggles that my wife and I have talked about going forward, me coming from a broken divorced family, is that we're going to have those hard conversations with my daughter about like why do grandpa and nana not live together, like just those sorts of conversations that naturally come up with kids being curious and kind of noticing things are off. So yeah, I'm grateful for that. And I think kind of in that, just one thing to add, there is somewhat of a challenge too when you marry someone who comes from an intact family. They could have a really hard time understanding your struggles, like Miranda mentioned, conflict avoidance.
You
Like
just read
that's
my
a real,
mind. That was my next question. Yeah.
yeah, it's such a real thing. We someone who comes from an intact family might just feel very safe and secure and just like not bothered
It's
by,
just an argument. Why are you so worried?
yeah, it's part of the deal. Like Miranda said, it's like this is everyday life. This is not something to be bothered by. I remember in one study the researchers said that there was a young woman who she got married, and in marriage her and her spouse had their first big fight, and he left the house. He was angry and she was feeling like really down and like afraid. And her first thought, I kid you not, her first thought was, I guess I should call a lawyer. And to him, once he came home, he was like, oh no, like he came from an intact family, and he was like, no, that's just like part of marriage.
Coping.
That's part
Yeah,
of
it's what I did.
relationships. Yeah, exactly. So we come from two very different points of view and approach relationships very differently. And so that can, I think, to any spouses out there listening who are married to someone who come from a divorced or broken family, I would say, as much as you can, like learn about their experience. And if you want to listen to our podcast or listen to a Dr. Bacon's content that kind of gives insight into what it's like to come from a broken family, please do that. You're going to better be able to love your spouse if you understand what they're going through.
Yeah, that's excellent. Because I think that's what we need to hear. We think we know each other, but again, until you're married and you know each other, and I always say you can see me naked, which takes guts to, okay, I'm showing you my body, but to see me naked inside is even harder, because I don't want you to see my fears, my flaws, my failings, and because that's too risky. So for you guys to be able to say, I'm revealing to you a little bit of, the terror that I feel at you leaving the house when we just had a fight, so wow. And so we have to be receptive of each other. We have to understand the intact spouse, the spouse that comes from the broken family, and try to be, Christ says to love one another. We need to love is patient, love is kind. Are we patient with our spouse as we're trying to navigate marriage and have them figure out that we're in it to win it, and we're not going to, you know what I mean? So it's you're walking the walk. So I want to ask you, so you're both devout Catholics. So here's kind of it's sensitive, but I don't care. I always go here and they can attack me all they want. Priests, what do you say to them? I have seen enough priests when I talk to them about broken marriages and helping me help my couple stand. They're like, well, they can always get annulment. I can't tell you how many times I want to slap them in the face. I don't, by the grace of God. I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? As if annulment is some magic pill. I've met some of the holiest priests. Holy priests who they understand marriage, even having not been married. But sometimes I want to shake them up and say, do you have a clue? Do you realize that just telling someone to have an annulment doesn't take away the fact that we made humans together? We vowed our lives together. This doesn't take anyway. So the point I'm getting at is that, what would you say to priests who either encourage one spouse to leave? Because that's what I found to be the case. Most of the time, unhappy spouse A goes to priest and priest says, well, And when they come back, then they say, well, okay, you probably have grounds for an annulment. Go get divorced, without ever having talked to spouse number two. And so my standards, people standing for reconciliation while their spouse is cheating on them, divorcing them, has divorced them, say that all my spouse needed was one person. And if it's your priest, the power level goes up this high. Just needed one person to say, no, you stick out this marriage. You can do this. What would either of you say to priests? What have you found from priests? Do you get support from priests for what you're doing? What are your thoughts on what they are doing, what they can do to make things better? That's a big question. Take it from any direction you wish.
Yeah, we'll hit this from a few different angles, but one story, Greg and Julie Alexander, who run the
Love them.
Alexander House, they're amazing. It was a priest who actually challenged them on their path to divorce and pursuing an annulment. He said, you know, okay, like if you want to go that route, we can talk about that. But before you do, he said, like, what's God's plan for marriage? Like when he invented this thing, what did he have in mind? It was through that process for them where they discovered, wow, this is like so beautiful. This is something we really want. Even though, for anyone who doesn't know the story, they both were in a horrible spot. They both were cheating on each other. Their marriage was a disaster. They were just so exhausted. They did have a few kids at that point. And so, you know, they just were in a horrible spot, but it was that priest who challenged them, who guided them, that led to their reconciliation, to the point where they've, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Bacon, I think there's helped over 5,000 couples in the past 20 years, and their success rate at keeping the couples together is 98%, which is insane. So think of that one priest. He had such an impact not only on them, but on all those other couples, their children. So priests out there listening, like, you can be that priest, you can challenge them. And I think that, yeah, we are living in a time where even in the devout Catholic world, we're seeing divorce prescribed and annulment prescribed as one of the first things we try to deal with a messy, broken marriage. And I think, you know, moms, dads, we deserve better. Spouses deserve better. And so I think that, sorry, my video is acting up here, but I'll keep going in this thought that, you know, we deserve better. The children deserve better. And so to priests out there, I would say, you know, I've met some incredible priests who are doing this right. And I would say, you know, to all those maybe who are a little bit more lenient on this, again, challenge them, guide them, get them good resources like Dr. Bacon's coaching, like Greg and Julie Alexander. Go to a therapist who's not just going to prescribe divorce as like the, you know, again, the first solution to these problems.
Sure.
Right. And, you know, in the medical world, if you think about this, if we were to, you know, prescribe someone get their limb amputated because their arm feels painful, you know, you would run far from that doctor. So, you know, imagine my arm's painful and red. I go to the emergency room and the doctor kind of walks in, looks at it for a little bit and says, well, we're going to have to amputate it. I would run out of there and get a second opinion.
I'm going to use that analogy. I may forget to credit you, but if you ever hear me using that, know that I'm loving you on the inside and thank you.
You're good. Take
it. It's a fantastic analogy.
Like we'd want to know, well, wait, can we try medicine? Can we maybe do surgery? Can we figure out like what's at the root of it and how can we fix the root, as opposed to just prescribing this sort of cutting off of the marriage? And so that would be my challenge, but I'm excited to hear what Miranda thinks too.
Yeah, I think priests are in such a difficult position in the sense that the teaching on marriage for Catholics is so hard, and you know, it's so unpopular. So they're already kind of in a tough position, and furthermore, you know, I don't think a lot of priests have been educated about, just because people haven't been educated about the effects of divorce on children, and you know, the fact that, you know, getting divorced, getting an annulment really doesn't solve all your problems, you know. And so I think a lot of priests like they just don't have that understanding, which is really, really unfortunate. And it ends up, you know, they end up doing a disservice, you know, to their flocks when they kind of run to annulment as the solution. So they're definitely in a tough position, but I think I 100% agree with what Jerry's saying. And I also think like the more that we can educate people about, you know, how divorce really, really affects the culture, how it affects, you know, the children, and later on, you know, people who are going to get married and have families, the more that they'll begin to, you know, kind of see that annulment is not this miracle cure, you know, like it really is sometimes like more detrimental, so I think I think we as people who are aware of the situation, I think we have an opportunity to educate and help priests understand as much as we can that annulment really isn't the most helpful thing in the world in most situations. I will say our priests here in Florida, our parish, they've spoken really strongly against divorce, and it was actually really beautiful. One of the homilies that he gave, my mom was there, and he spoke really strongly against divorce and against, he defined annulment, which I think a lot of people don't know what annulment means, even Catholics.
Right.
So he and it was a really beautiful moment for him to have the courage to stand up there, and I'm sure a lot of divorced people were in that congregation, including my mom, and for him to still speak up and tell the truth about divorce and annulment and things that just really needed to be said.
God bless them, because so many of our priests are also children of divorce. I would love to just teach in seminaries and get them to kind of open up, because this is probably the biggest issue they'll ever have to deal with. Every
Right.
time people come to them is this. So, okay, I have 2 questions, last questions, only for the sake of time, though I could keep talking to you guys longer. Maybe I'll have you back on. That would be fun. But for today, the first question is, it's a fill in the blank. When I die, I will know my life has been a success, or I will know I have fulfilled my vocation if.
I think for me, if I become a saint, if I, am a good father and husband, and for me personally, if I lead people well and, serve them in that capacity, whether it's in the business world or in the ministry world.
Yeah, I think sainthood would be wonderful. But I think part of that would be my husband and my children loving God. That would be amazing.
It's kind of the same question, but you're standing there, St. Peter grabs you and he turns you around and says, look at that. Look what you did. What's the difference that you want to see him say you made that difference, in addition to what you just said? Like for me, it's, I want God to turn me around, St. Peter, and say, whatever. See that? You saved 1 million marriages. Those people, they fought because of something they heard you say, because of a podcast you had once with Miranda and Joey on it, because you know what I mean? So yeah, so kind of taking that a step further, what do you want to hear God say when you get up there?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess for me, I just feel so passionate about helping young people, teenagers and young adults in particular, who come from divorced or broken families. So I'd love to see them there in that line, just knowing like, hey, they could have and were on the path to reject God, to reject faith, to reject eternal life, essentially. But because of, the content you and your team produce, because of the resources and programs you built, they were able to, heal from that trauma, to build virtue, to build a relationship with God, and get to the point where they are, to build beautiful marriages, all that, and to get to heaven one day. So that's what I would say.
So, Miranda?
I would say a little bit more generally, just that the people that I interacted with felt seen and they felt encouraged. I think that would be, we all deal with a lot of issues, and a little encouragement can go a long way.
Yeah, it can. It's biblical. Encouragement is. Encourage one another. So
yeah, you're right.
Yeah. It's actually part of the super couple formula that I found, the SACRED. Yeah. I thought I was looking at pessimism versus optimism, and I realized every super couple was a pessimist married to an optimist. And as I dug more deeply, I'm like, how's that happening? I was like, oh, I know what I'm looking at. Happy marriages have spouses that are encouraging. Unhappy marriages have spouses that are discouraging. Yeah, sure. Start a podcast, but most of them fail. Thanks. I'm feeling so encouraged. Okay, so where it's the last question besides the logistical stuff. Name one thing you'd have our listeners do differently as a result of something they heard today. Each of you gets a chance. Actions. Give them some action to do.
I would say maybe for different people in the audience. So if you're a young person who comes from a divorced or broken family, my question to you would be, how has that affected you? And more importantly, how is it affecting you today? Just give that some thought. And if any of our resources could be helpful for you, we'd love to serve you. So check out our podcast, and I'm sure we'll go through that, the other resources as well. To parents listening who are maybe in a difficult marriage, I would say to you, fight. Like seriously, even if there may need to be a separation because things at home aren't safe, your kids will be forever grateful for you if you go through this process of trying to heal your marriage, to reconcile with your spouse, to show them that even if things are broken, they can be redeemed. To parents who are divorced, I would say to you, approach your children, and maybe even I would just invite you to this. You can think about it, perhaps even apologize for the way that your actions impacted them and brought them to this point where they are struggling in one way or another, how they've your actions and your spouse's actions inflicted this sort of trauma on them. There could be some really beautiful conversations that come from that. And then I would say to anyone out there who just was married to someone who loves someone from a broken family, try to learn again about what they've been through so that you can better help and love them. And if we can help any of you, which I know we can, please make use of our resources, which we'll mention at the end.
Yeah, and I'd add to that before Miranda goes, if you are divorced, consider reconciling. I get so many people say, I believe in what you're doing, and I believe couples can reconcile. It's just not me. Our God is way bigger than you, way bigger than your narcissistic spouse, way bigger than your spouse who you say is abusive, who I tend to find out was typically just mean. Big difference between abuse and mean. But regardless if you were true or not, God is bigger than that. And if God can turn Saul into Paul with his grace and your faith, the problem is usually your faith. You don't believe it can happen. Sending him to someone like me who can say, let me help you work through that. And by God's grace in my standards group, which started out with 4 people in my living room, now has over 270 people from 40 states and 10 countries. We've already had, I just was counting yesterday. We're working on reconciliation 16, 17, and 18 right now of people who once said, I will never get back with you. It happens. It happens. So I'm just excited. All right, Miranda, one thing you'd have our listeners do differently as a result of something they heard today.
I would love for anyone listening, whether they're in a really broken place because of a difficult marriage, or if they are unmarried but feeling like maybe marriage is not for them because of the difficulties they've witnessed, I would love for them to believe that a beautiful marriage is possible, and that it's that God's looking out for them. And I would maybe recommend reading Psalm 139 and just really reflecting on that, and believing that those words are true.
Summarize 139. Which one is that?
It's, I know every hair on your head. I know when you sit and when you stand. Yeah, it's a really beautiful, I guess, poem, just about how God is with us in our suffering and how he knows what's going on, and he also wants good for us. He doesn't just want pain and suffering in our lives. He wants us to thrive.
He wants us to have life and have it abundantly.
Absolutely.
And have an abundant marriage. Yeah, you guys are amazing. I cannot believe how God brought you together. There is something happening. Something is percolating in the Holy Spirit. I believe there is a renewal going on. You've got Rejoice Marriage Ministries. You've got me and my standards group. You've got Marriage United. You've got Standards United. You've got You Restored Ministry for the children. You've got Layla Miller. They're popping up everywhere where the children of God are finally starting to say, enough is enough. And fortunately for the people who almost fell victim to getting divorced themselves, there's so many of you people out there I have met who have stuck it out, and God bless you, because I know your marriages are still not ideal, but you've done it for your children. You've done it, forget the kids. You've done it because you stood before God and said, I will, good times and bad, sickness and health, until the day one of us dies. And you carry that cross and you carry it with grace, and you're sucking it up, maybe exactly what's needed to get your spouse to heaven, or a child, or a neighbor watching. It is amazing. I don't want you to suffer either on earth, but when you realize that you carry your cross for 80 years, maybe 90, and then you get to heaven and you put that down, and for all eternity, 1,000 years and 10,000 years and 1,000,000 years and 1,000,000,000 years. I mean, really just try to wallow in 1,000,000,000 years. What can we even comprehend what that's like? 1,000,000,000,000 years. So many into our eternity that you forget that little blip of time. It's like, what was I even worried about back then? I'm so glad I did it. That's what I want to say. Just carry that cross, and God will give you the grace, and the reward for you will be great in heaven. So that's all I have to say there. All right, enough of my cheerleading. Guys, tell them again. Where can they get your podcast? And I'll post it all below here. What do you have? Podcast? You have a book, Joey? Tell them one more time.
Yeah. So those are the two main things that we'd recommend. Our podcast is called Restored: Helping Children of Divorce. You can get it wherever you listen to podcasts, or if you want to just go to our website, restoredministry.com. Ministry is singular, restoredministry.com. We also have a book that I wrote, Miranda edited. It's called It's Not Your Fault: A Practical Guide to Navigating the Pain and Problems from Your Parents' Divorce. And it features 33 questions and answers on what we've identified as the most pressing challenges that young people from broken families face. And so if you want to check that out, you can get it on Amazon. The website has all that info as well. In addition to that, we have some other resources, but I'd recommend those primarily. The other ones we have is we're attempting to build a network of counselors, spiritual directors, mentors that we trust and recommend, so that young people can come to us and then we'll point them in the right direction. Online community, we've started that, where young people, again, who come from broken families, can talk to each other about what they've been through, find support and resources and solutions for the challenges that they're facing. Aside from that, we're actually just about to release some video courses. So 2 courses. One we filmed with a trauma therapist. She's been doing trauma therapy, treating people who've been through trauma for 17 years. And so we filmed a course on trauma. It's called Broken to Whole: Tactics to Heal from Your Parents' Divorce or Broken Marriage. And so in it, she talks about what is trauma, how does it affect you, especially this particular type of trauma, and what are some things you can do to heal from it and navigate your difficult emotions, and build healthy relationships, and most of all, just break that cycle in your own life. Later this month, we are releasing another course that I filmed on how someone who doesn't come from a broken family, but someone who just loves or leads someone from a broken family, can help them. It's called Real Help. It's just essentially giving them tactics. It's a guide that they can use to confidently help someone who comes from that situation. And that's based on an article that we wrote. Just has 10 tips that that's thousands of views every month, with people just really spending time consuming that advice, because there's people out there who love or lead someone from a broken family, don't know what to do or say in those situations. So we guide them through that, and that course goes deeper into those. And those are free, by the way, so people can make use of all of that. So those are the ones I'd recommend, but the podcast and the book are the places I would start.
But free is in my budget. I mean, so I'm pretty sure most people can afford that course, so that'll be awesome. You guys have been such a blessing, and I'm going to pray that God blesses your ministry in ways that you haven't even begun to understand yet, and that, reconciliation in one or both of your families, that people come up to you and tell you that their marriages are reconciled, their kids come up to you and tell you that they are so healed because of something you guys said. I know it's not easy doing what you do because of the nature of what I do. So I know that there's some people maybe attacking you at times, saying, why do you do this? Why can't you just suck it up? And you know what I mean? I don't have to ask you on the air, but you're doing God's work. And so I am so grateful. And you both have a class, your class, and a sensitivity that to do this with a great, let's say grace. Classy is too secular. A grace to do this in a way that says, oh, I love my mom and dad. And thank you to your mom and dad for allowing you guys, if all 4 of them know that you're doing this. And I think they support you either way,
Thanks so much for having us, Dr. Bacon.
Thank you,
really
guys.
Appreciate it, Dr. Bacon. And if anyone wants to listen to Miranda's episode on the podcast, by the way, she's been on multiple times, but the first time was episode 8. So if you go to restoredministry.com/8, you can hear that episode, and in it she reads an article that she wrote, which is just so moving and beautiful. So thanks so much
Your
for having us
divorce.
again.
Yeah, that
Honoring
was.
to hear.
I forgot to tell you how I end my show. Joey, you might know, but I don't know. But if you don't know, I'll say it, but I'm gonna give you a hint. It's called Sunny Side Up. Okay. So for all of you watching, I am so grateful. Go follow me, breakfastwithbacon.com, on Rumble, on Facebook, Instagram. I'm trying to think all the places we are. Look for me. It is for me and for them as well. Like us, share us, because it really does help. And tell me what you would like to hear. Tell them what you'd like to hear them talk about on their podcast as well. But again, go to my show, listen to the amazing guests that God has brought me. He did bring Joey to my show before. So there are just some things that are so deep that people are so vulnerable and willing to talk about, and it helps people. My show is always willing. I just want to save souls. So anyway, breakfastwithbacon.com. But we're going to take us off the air. I am Dr. Christine Bacon. You've been watching Breakfast with Bacon, and I want to remind you always to live your life. Sunny side up. Say it.
Sunny side
Sunny
up.
side up.
Got it.
There you go. Sorry.